No audio, Charlie.
My goodness. My goodness. Still no music. And Jeremiah's gonna be mad at me. I always get the music into the audio version that we post on to Spotify and all popular podcast platforms, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm still learning StreamYard. I will get it right next time. I don't think it supports audio from Keynote, so I'll have to do the slides and the audio separately, which is fine. We got some folks here already. Jumping General, welcome. Frog Puppet, Sean, and I hope I don't butcher your name, Sean. Kirkshank. Awesome. Oh, Liam wants to join. Liam, it says device is not connected. You need to connect your mic and cam before I can add you to the stream. Holy smokes. I can hear Jeremiah and Kay. Jeremiah is muted, but wow. Okay, awesome. Off to a great start. Boom, we're live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 7, hard to believe, of the Coin Jam podcast. Cameron, thanks for joining. What's going on? And yeah, we are off and rolling. Now, I was not kidding when I said this could be our most controversial episode, because there will be some opinions shared that might rub people the wrong way, no matter what side of the aisle, so to speak, you find yourself on in terms of this hobby. Even perhaps more controversial than the Oregon episode. So in this episode, we're going to be talking all about reproduction parts and cabinets and all sorts of things like that. You know, how far are you willing to go for originality and you know, being a purist versus a pragmatist? And yeah, hopefully we'll get some good conversations out of that, and looking forward to engaging with everybody in the live chat. I don't think he's here. He usually doesn't communicate. Oh, we'll add Liam real quick. Liam is got a bad echo. Liam.
You got bad echo.
Yeah, test.
Test.
Yeah, I'm going to mute you, Liam, just to while you figure that out.
I run a mouse over.
Yeah, don't unmute yourself yet. It sounded like I can hear your I can hear myself. So I'm guessing that your speakers and your microphone are not the same thing or on the same system, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So now that we got all four of us, yeah, we'll be talking all about that sort of thing. Everything from J-Rock to LCD to arcade one-up, and everything in between. Reproduction harnesses, reproduction artwork, new old stock stuff, all of that sort of thing. But you know, before we get going with that, we'll kind of do introductions and just go through the sort of typical stuff that we always talk about every episode, our standard updates. Thank you, everybody, for joining in the live chat. That's awesome. We love interacting with everybody. Jerry Voluptuous, one of my favorites. I don't want to play favorites, but Jerry is one of my favorites. Overtime Arcade channel members, and Jerry owns a delicious pizza restaurant just outside of Philly. I had the pleasure to meet Jerry in person for the first time recently and stopped by his restaurant. So Manbrozo's To Go in Aston, Pennsylvania. Check it out if you're ever in the area. And Mike, or should I say St. Michael, Mike from Mike's Amateur Arcade Monitor Repair, joining us in the live chat. Thank you, Mike, for on behalf of the entire hobby, for everything you do. Mike doesn't just have an awesome YouTube channel where he's constantly working on some of the most pernicious issues with all different kinds of CRT monitor chassis. Mike also does a ton of stuff behind the scenes, testing new reproduction parts, lots of new flybacks. He's recently been testing new reproduction neck boards, which is sort of a perfect setup for this episode. So Mike, thanks for joining. And yeah, absolute legend. And as Jeremiah said, we got some high class names in the chat here. So why don't we start with intros? So if you've never seen this before, never seen the podcast before, I'm Charlie from Overtime Arcade. If you're watching this on the live stream, you're watching it on my channel. I've been the host of the podcast. Kay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kay. I'm the owner of Prime Arcade Sales and Repair here in West Texas. I buy, sell, repair, and restore arcade and pinball equipment, as well as some other coin-op stuff. I also have a TikTok and a Facebook, and that's where you can find me. I don't hear you,
Hearing
Charlie.
nothing from you, Charlie.
Oh, I was making an OnlyFans joke, so it's probably good that I was muted. I was talking about how the amazing provocative dances that you're doing on TikTok all the time, but I think most of that's moved behind a paywall now.
Yeah, family show, Charlie. Family show.
There you go. There you go. Jeremiah, tell us about you and your channel.
Well, my name is Jeremiah Jackson, and I run the Coin Op Corner YouTube channel, which has merch now. Please buy it. Don't upload very regularly, but there you go. Nice. I like that one. So I don't upload very regularly, but as soon as I get to everything, I get these full-length videos where start to finish pretty much the whole restoration in a single video. So if you like that kind of stuff, I do video arcades, but also some of the more obscure coin ops like claw machines. And you can see here, I got a gumball machine episode coming up too. So stay tuned for that.
And we lost Liam. Sounds like Liam was having some technical difficulty. So Liam is one half of the team behind Retrobotics on YouTube with his wife, Sam. They do great videos on all different types of mostly arcade machines. They do some pinball as well. I was actually just at Liam and Sam's house earlier today. We can talk about that a little bit when he gets back online. But yeah, I think their most recent video was all about the kind of tricky Atari logo joysticks on the Gauntlet cabinet and sort of, taking them apart and putting them back together, fixing them up, that sort of thing. So awesome. So usually we're not as bad as this. I know Liam's he's in a new house. He's got everything just set up now. And he was going to try to live stream from his arcade, but we'll get him back on relatively soon. And, it's kind of funny at this point that Mike still calls his channel Mike's Amateur Arcade Monitor Repair, because I think, most of us would see him sort of as a pro's pro, but for the rest of us, this is definitely an amateur podcast. So why don't we roll right into the sort of standard updates here. Jeremiah, you want to go first, talking about any game room updates, any pickups, that sort of thing? What's been going on in your world?
So I haven't picked up anything new since the last episode. The gumball machine to my left here, I picked that up right before the last episode, but I've just now got working on it. The only addition to the game room is that Kansas 50th anniversary T-shirt, because I went to see Kansas on the 50th anniversary tour, and how that's relevant is that's when I met up with Cameron, who we had on an episode recently, and I dropped off the joust/chop lifter that I picked up for him a couple episodes ago. So nothing new in the game room, but I did do a little bit of arcade stuff with Cameron the other week.
So between your handoff to Cameron and also the handoff you made to me recently, I think you're basically just starting a new business, being a cabinet runner up and down the East Coast, through the hollers and valleys, just running cabs to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me some of the fix of picking up a new game and maybe even doing a little work on it, but I don't have to keep it. So if anybody wants to make me do that, that's fine with me.
I mean, some people started that way, and it's blown up into a huge business for them, even international now. And of course, I'm speaking of Bob Cunningham. Hey, much better. Welcome, Liam. Of course, I'm speaking of Bob Cunningham, who owns As Found Arcade Machines on Facebook. I think he got his start sort of just like providing a low-cost shipping option to folks all across the country, and now he's turned that into a huge business. Picking and reselling things all across the country. And I think he's even planning a European tour either later this year or early next year. And he's the guy that got that, was it the time machine or time capsule warehouse up in Canada where all of these universal cabs. Yeah. Liam, welcome. I kind of introduced you on your behalf, but I don't know if you want to go ahead and fill in the blanks there and tell us about any recent pickups or game room updates you have to share.
The only game room update is now that you can actually see it now for the first time. I'm actually doing a session from in the arcade, although I'm not burning phosphors. Thank you so much, Charlie, for helping me rejuvenate those phosphors, at least on Space Invaders over there.
You got a couple more hours left of life on that tube.
That's all I need. That's how much it gets played. No, No recent pickups on our part. Everything has been pretty static here. Nothing new has entered the game room since last time. Nothing has moved on any of the projects that are currently in the workshop, since I'm all just waiting for parts to show up. So this is it for now.
You got it all set up now. I was playing Firefox and Tron earlier today. So we weren't just, it wasn't just all business at a repair party. We were hanging out. Liam actually fed my kids brunch, made them waffles. It was great. They had a great time. They were playing with Sam too, the snap circuits.
Open.
Yeah. Fully operational battleship. And Kay, how about you? Any cool things you've picked up lately? I know you, volume-wise, you do more than all of us combined, but anything super interesting lately?
As far as the shop goes, I haven't really picked up much for projects or anything like that, mostly because I'm just trying to burn through the dozens of stuff I've already got. I did pick up a confidential mission in a dedicated cabinet that was a buyback. So I'd already worked on it before. I'd only sold it maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So very little has to be done to it to get it back up and ready for sale. And I think I've already got a buyer anyway, so I don't really have to worry about it. The only game room update I have is the Cyclone pinball machine that I bought for myself, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago and put in the shop and didn't do anything with. I finally brought it here and did the work, and it's 100%. I fixed every issue it had. I changed all the rubbers with some new Titan silicone rings, LEDs, spotlights, all that fun stuff, and it's a fully playable and operational pin in my collection.
There you go. That's got to be satisfying to actually do something for yourself, right? Not just your customers.
Apparently, the only way I can really make myself work on something that's for me is to put it in my way in my home, because that's the only way I'll do it.
There you go. And I think that's that was one of the reasons that I was over at Liam's place today. So Del from Delusionals Arcade. Most folks, if you're watching or listening to this, are probably familiar with that channel. I was actually up his way, I don't know, last weekend or the week before, I can't remember. And I actually got a Qbert board from him. And he had a 25-inch standard res monitor that I guess was in his way. Like literally he was tripping over it, and his wife was getting on his case, telling him, you know, you need to find a better place to store this thing. So he gave it to me to bring down to Liam and Sam down in Maryland. So I sort of helped out with the kind of Arcade Underground Railroad free transportation.
If you're listening, thank you so much again for that monitor. It'll hopefully help out our Smash TV.
Yeah, because you're wrestling with a Cortec that just didn't want to behave. So hopefully this, I think it was a K7400, something like that, that Dell gave you. What a nice guy. So yeah, and for me, I'm almost like scared to admit this. With only a couple days left in the month of August, I haven't picked up a single machine this month at all. This is I'm breaking my streak. I have picked up a cabinet every month so far this year. Last month in July, I tied my record. I picked up 5 cabinets last month. I tied March of this year was also 5 cabinets. And so I'm feeling a little, I don't know, weird that I haven't picked one up. So I don't know if I'm starting to go through withdrawal or whatever. I've been getting a lot of parts, buying a lot of parts. I got some from Dell. I got some from Clav and eBay, things that I needed for the projects that I've got going, because I've got plenty of projects going on right now to keep me busy, and sort of hard to keep track of where I am with each one and what I need to put into them. Been doing a ton of videos though. So I think since our last episode, I had one really kind of blow up. So I did one on a tube swap for a Geo7 because I broke the neck on a Geo7. Unfortunately, I think that was right after our monitor episode was our last one. I went and I necked a tube, and fortunately I caught most of it on camera. But if you want to hear one of the most just horrifyingly haunting sounds that you can hear in this hobby, go watch that video. But then really what happened was about 2 weeks ago, or I guess 2 weeks ago today, I released my kangaroo pickup video, and that one has just gone stratospheric. It's over 6,000 views at this point. And I guess people just like abandoned malls, because I picked up that kangaroo from an abandoned mall in Cincinnati, Ohio. And yeah, that's gone absolutely amazing. I did do another pickup video last week. That was for the Dig Dug cocktail that had been converted to Do Run Run. Do Run Run, surprisingly fun game. Dell was telling me that and I think Cameron was telling me too. Both of them were telling me that I should just leave it as a Do Run Run because that's a fun and I guess pretty uncommon game.
And it was a really nicely done conversion on the outside.
On the outside, yeah. The inside, not so much. So the outside, they got rid of the Dig Dug underlay, which is unfortunate because no one's really reproducing it right now. Although fortunately, there are high-res scans of it, so I'll be able to get somebody to make it for me. But yeah, Liam, on the inside, so I lost count of all the problems on the inside, right? So no isolation transformer, no line filter, no fuses at all in the cabinet, right? The G07 FBO 13-inch monitor was plugged in directly to wall power. There's no switch in the cabinet. They cut the frame of the monitor in order to rotate it from vertical to horizontal, and there's like super sharp edges from where they cut the frame. And what was I caused a problem too. I connected the multimeter wrong when I was measuring voltage. I had them on 2 DC lines instead of 1 to ground. And I don't know if I caught this on camera. I tripped over the wire for my isolation transformer power supply thing and yanked it out and could have shorted something. But yeah, sort of a bit of a jack in the box, but we'll get that going just fine. And then I just released an episode today. It was available yesterday to Overtime Arcade channel members like Jerry Voluptuous, who's been in here, and Sean Cruikshank, and Frog Puppet, and I'm trying to forget if I'm forgetting others. So I did so this is part 2 of the Kangaroo. I got the monitor going again. So when I bought that Kangaroo, it had a Matsushita TM202G, which does not have the best reputation. Kay, have you worked on many Matsushitas?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so this is a monitor that is not well regarded at all. It's basically a Panasonic TV that they converted at the factory to a arcade monitor. Like half the chassis is unpopulated, and it's just sort of really different from any Wells Gardner or Electrohome or anything you'd be used to seeing. Oh, and we got another big name. I think this is the Chance Johnson from the Canadian Arcade. Lots of big names in the live stream, in the live chat today. Thank you, Chance, for joining. So Matsushita, total mess. Did a cap kit on it, but I was having all kinds of sync issues, but finally got it working and ran into a really interesting issue with the isolation transformer for that too. I guess it draws more amps than a typical monitor. But yeah, lots of things going on. I've been working on Qbert. I was supposed to have that Qbert video out today instead, but I forgot to order something from Arcade Parts and Repair that I needed for the power supply. But yeah, lots and lots of activity. But I haven't picked up a cabinet since July, and it just doesn't feel right. So if anyone has an incredible lead on something, I might have something to pick up in the next couple of days. So anyway, with that out of the way, why don't we talk about projects? Jeremiah, you do have quite a bit going on as well, and I know you've been providing updates to us in our private behind the scenes chat room, and also you've been posting little teasers on your community tab on your channel. So when are you finally going to get the final part of the pack restore launched?
As soon as I finish fixing the Pac-Man board. So I think I mentioned in our last episode that I've got the monitor running, which is what I was concerned I wouldn't be able to get running. Monitors are troublesome, and they're known for whatever causes the problem just blows everything back up after you replace it. But thankfully, I was able to fix that monitor in one shot. But now the PCB, the other Saturday, I spent about 6 hours going through every trace from every ROM and every RAM chip, and also the Z80 processor, just making sure everything's connected where it needs to go. And fixed a few traces on that. Found a few chips that weren't outputting anything, and got all those replaced. But I've still got nothing but strangely 6s coming up on the board, and this like disheartening, what on earth? A disheartening sound whenever I turn the machine on. So we got a little bit of demon possession going on with that Pac-Man, which hopefully I'll be able to fix in the future as soon as I've got time to tear into it. I may have reestablished connections that weren't supposed to be established in the first place many months ago when I did first start working on it. So I need to go through now, and instead of checking for broken traces, check for shorts. Aside from that, I've been working on some gumball machines, which will be the next episode, which will hopefully be out before the next podcast episode. And while that's not incredibly unique information, it'll be an interesting little romp. So I look forward to that.
So I think, go ahead.
Between the 4 ghosts possessing your machine, I blame Clyde.
He is the only one without a rhyming name, so he is immediately suspicious.
Also, I don't know what that was earlier, Charlie, when you blocked the camera, but that's the worst magic trick I've ever seen.
Well,
Nothing changed.
I put a Post-it note on it because I jumped up just to make sure that everything was fine with the asteroids. I got spooked earlier, sort of before we went live. I was getting weird noises on. None of these games have attract mode sounds turn on, so I jumped up and everyone saw my the guys here saw my gym shorts, and I was worried that it was the Tempest starting to freak out, but it was actually the Joust. Just for whatever reason, started making sounds, and I rebooted it, and it seemed to be fine. So I threw a Post-it note on over the camera because earlier I tried to turn off the camera and it booted me from the stream. So I think I've got it all figured out now. And yo, Eddie,
Tempest problems for one day.
Yeah. Yo, Eddie, thanks for joining. Levi, thanks for joining. I think hopefully we got the right Chance Johnson now with the avatar that I think he's been using most recently. But yeah, okay. Liam, how about you? Why don't we talk about what you've been working on, even as few as a couple hours ago, as far as I know.
Yeah, the big one that we just put out a video on is Sam and I finally got around to finishing our gauntlet, which meant tracking down 4 original Atari logo joysticks, the worst engineered joysticks ever made, and installing them in our Gauntlet 2, which is now playing a lot better and looks a lot nicer too, given that the joysticks are installed. So we're really happy about that. Also, as mentioned before, Charlie was here earlier today helping me out with his rejuvenator. We got Space Invaders all rejuvenated and looked great. Apparently, the tube was so dead that it didn't even register at all on the rejuvenator, just a flat nothing. So it's nice to see an actual image as opposed to the faint after image of what might have been loaded on that screen. Though we also tried to work on Tempest, and we broke the cardinal rule of don't move a working vector machine. We pulled it out and we put Charlie's dead board in it, and that board stayed dead. And then we put our working board back in, and nothing. That was super fun.
I think your Tempest just turned on when you said Tempest.
Yeah, I wanted to show Charlie I was able to fix the blue.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we have the blue back on.
I can see it. Look at that. 2 Tempests, 2 working Tempests on one live stream. That's got to be some kind of record. And just want to say thank you for Stringer Films with the $200 million super chat donation. Thank you so much. Stringer Films says Geo7 with no ISO. Seems like it's more than meets the eye. Yeah, that was definitely full of surprises. We'll get that working soon enough. I got an ISO on order. I just placed that order with Peter yesterday. We'll get that working. But one of the things I want to do with that cabinet is I do want to eventually turn it back into a Dig Dug, or maybe figure out some sort of way to run Dig Dug and do run inside. I have a go ahead. Well, yeah, well, but even then, it's like you have the horizontal versus vertical sort of thing to contend with. We'll get to BitKit later. That'll be a topic of discussion in a little bit. But I have a non-working Dig Dug PCB that I brought to Liam's house today. So we were hanging out. I brought a couple of my kids over. Liam cooked them waffles. And then Sam was playing with them Legos and snap circuits and playing outside with the dog and that sort of thing. And Liam has a FPGA cat box. So I brought a bunch of my broken boards over and hooked them up to sort of see, what was going on. That's a great sort of tool for troubleshooting, diagnosing issues with PCBs that have CPUs that are supported by it, like 6502 and what was the last one? I'm blanking. Z80, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, sure enough, it's not working. But I've got a lead on where we can go from there. And yeah, with that Tempest, I brought my backup Tempest PCB that's also not working. And we couldn't even get very far because apparently the crystal or the clock's not working on it right at all. But and for a moment, I know Liam's heart was beating extra fast before we could get his Tempest working, and I felt bad too because the only reason he touched his was to help me fix mine. But yeah, but yeah, I'm glad you were able to get that blue working. So I brought my Rejuvenator over there, but neither of us realized that the 6100 monitor actually uses a CR24 adapter for the B&K Precision 467 Rejuvenator. So most monitors use like a CR23 or a 30 or a 31. This one uses a 24, which is almost exactly the same as the 23, except red and green are flipped, and it's got a different sort of I guess the sort of pin what's it called? Yeah, the protector, the plastic sort of thing that goes over the pins is a different fit. So yeah, Stringer Film is a 24. And so we're Googling and looking for if we could even find like a CR24 socket to use. I know somebody in the EU was selling them on Clav a couple years ago for super cheap, like €6 a piece, but we got to figure out where we can get a 24. Or I do have a universal adapter that just has sort of individual pins that you connect to the...
we checked that we couldn't do that unless we yanked the spark protector off of it.
Yeah, because the pins are only exposed on the outside, right? They aren't sort of like pins that you can put the universal on. So yeah, if you have a CR24 socket stringer, would love to buy it for you, or even just borrow. Like if you have a CR24 adapter, we'd be happy to borrow it and pay for shipping both ways. I'd be happy to do that. Let's see. And I have a huge bag of them too, right? Like Liam was probably saw me dump them onto the Asteroids cocktail that he's sitting at right now, and sure enough, we didn't have it. I even had a CR6 adapter for the black and white tube in the Space Invaders, and now Stringer's going to go check. Let's see other things I've been working on. I've been working on the Qbert and the transformer assembly is in good shape. I need to rebuild the power supply, and we'll get close on that. What else have I spending a lot of time with the Kangaroo. I have the monitor working now. The board, fortunately, is completely running, fully up and running. I've got to rebuild the joystick for that one. I've got to source either an original or a scan to get the artwork reproduced for the sort of combination bezel glass, one piece of glass that they use on the Irish Kangaroo cabs. Mike from Mike's Amateur Arcade Monitor Repair says the plastic guide in the CR24 pulls right off, and you can clip wires to the pins quite easily. I think Liam tried that, but his has been glued on.
And given what happened to Charlie's Pango, I am very much unwilling to try yanking on a 6100. Those do not grow on trees.
I cannot say I blame them. I think though, correct me if I'm wrong, Kay, you've got an entire field of color vector monitors just sitting out there baking in the West Texas sun.
I have an entire field of color vector games that are lacking monitors.
Well, that's a different story. So yeah, why don't you tell us what you've been working on in addition to the Cyclone? What's been going on in your workshop?
So a lot of the repairs and stuff I've done lately, I didn't bother to make videos of because they were just kind of repeats, just building multicades and stuff like that. But I haven't filmed a whole lot of content lately. But what I'm working on next is I've got a pair of Fast and Furious assistants. One of them is lacking a monitor, and they both have computer problems, so I got to repair those for a client. I've also got a Silent Scope EX that monitor chassis needs to be rebuilt and the flyback replaced. I use that monitor to test a K7500 from a different cabinet, and so I know the tube works, I know the game works and everything. I just need to rebuild its monitor, and it'll go back to its home. And I've also got a dual Versus cabinet that I've got a client that wants. So I haven't done anything to it. I know it'll power on. The monitors come on, but they don't show anything. It could just be a power supply thing, could be a board thing. I don't know. I haven't done anything with them, but you can see the monitors are firing on. They just don't have anything to show. So once I've gone through that, it should make a nice little decent cabinet for this guy to put into his arcade. So I mean, there's dozens of other projects other than that, but I think those are the next 3 that I'm gonna get to.
Very cool. Yeah, and Stringer Films is saying he's only got a 22, 23, and 25, so we'll have to figure something out. But yeah, lots of love for Andrew B in the live chat. I think probably more than half of all Tempests that are live today have in some way to thank Andrew B, either even if it's just for his guide on the 6100 monitor. But yeah, and so Liam, I think I maybe skipped past like what ended up being the problem with the blue, because we wanted to rejuve it thinking that would be the issue.
That still might be the issue. The blue is currently maxed out on drive and bias, and it just barely looks close to the other colors. What I ended up doing was turning down red and green and cranking the brightness on the monitor until they all looked relatively similar.
And you don't have like
still maxed out.
You don't have. They're not called. I don't think they're called retrace lines on vectors, but like when when they
will
scans,
show up if I turn the brightness 1 more millimeter. If I leave it right where it is, there are no retrace lines. But if I just twitch it, they'll show up. So I think it's perfectly dialed in, and now I'm not touching it again. It's staying right where it is.
Cool. And Jeremiah, other than gumball machines and that pernicious Ms. Pack, what else has been cooking in your workshop?
Nothing really. I've been mostly focused on, whenever I have time for working on this stuff, just the Pac-Man and the gumballs. The gumballs are a lot easier because there's no traces or anything. It's just cleaning it and putting it back together, making sure gears aren't grinding too bad. So yeah, just Pac-Man and gumball machines for the time being. I don't know if the 100-year-old claw machine was working by our last episode. I think I was still waiting on the motor to come in for that, but that's come in, and now the 100-year-old claw machine that Charlie helped me get, that we met up to swap for, that is fully working now, and there will be an episode
alert on
that in 6 to 8 months.
And that'll be what? That'll be season 3 of Coin Op Corner.
Well, hopefully it'll be the end of season 1, and season 2 will come whenever I get into all this crap again, which you guys have been tempting me to do.
Yep. Hey, everyone loves it, right? Like, you got fans locally, you got fans all around the world. Everyone wants more of Jeremiah Jackson and Coin Op Corner. But speaking of,
if you love me so much, buy merch and then I'll come back.
Hey, I got this right here, and I got my mug. I haven't used it for coffee yet. I don't want to. It's a Gen 1, original run of the Coin Op Corner mugs, and I'm not sure. I want to preserve it.
What you got to get is one of these little nifty metal cups and put all your quarters in it. So
all kinds of merch. I see we were able to convince Kay to put on one of his Prime Arcade shirts. There you go. Very cool. So yeah, Kay, and speaking of what's coming, what are kind of the next couple of videos you have in mind? What projects are in the queue? Any parts, any things you're looking to track down that our massive audience of 20,000 live stream viewers right now might be able to help with?
I don't think there's anything specific I'm looking for any of my upcoming projects. I'm sure I'll realize how wrong this statement is when I start to get into them, and I'm missing a whole bunch of parts if there's just a bunch of defects. But for the most part, there's not anything I'm looking for that I can't just get from Arcade Shop or anything like that. Nothing too niche.
Okay, Liam, how about you? You launched the Gauntlet video today, but what else is coming soon, and what parts are you looking for?
Let's see. I still have some parts for things that are in the workshop over there. I need those monitor brackets for Millipede. We're probably going to just make those ourselves. Sam will make those. She's talked about just building them. So if you could get us some dimensions of them, that would be much appreciated. We need the back panels for Lunar Lander control panel, the light PCB and the wooden retaining panel that goes underneath it. I need art for Smash TV, but I can get that from Zasbo, so that's just about it, really.
Well, and you've got what I saw a bunch of your projects going on. I don't know. Do you want to talk about any of those?
Yeah, so the current projects, I think I've talked about them previously. We have an asteroids in the back room that is going to become a lunar lander. We managed to find an original lunar lander control panel in a junkyard, and we've mostly restored it. It's just missing the light PCB and the wooden retaining bracket, as I said, but it had the thruster. And the thruster cleaned up really nicely. So we're hoping to either put in a asteroids with a multi-lunar lander on it, or find an original lunar lander PCB and put it in that cabinet. And that'll just go in the lineup next to our asteroids deluxe, because we also have a asteroids cocktail. So lots of asteroids going around. We don't need a dedicated asteroids upright. We also have the Smash TV in there. That is one step closer to completion, thanks to Dell and Charlie for carting us over another 25-inch monitor that will hopefully be easier than that horrible Cortec.
I was just the mule.
Well, thank you so much to Dell for sending it our way. We have all the joysticks for Smash TV. We have a panel on order. So all we need now for it, assuming everything else works, is I need to stop being lazy and burn some ROMs, and also get the front bezel and the CPO.
Very cool. And that millipede cocktail, right? that looks like it's been I don't know, sitting preserved in a bog for a couple of decades.
It took a few rounds in the dunk tank.
Yeah. And I can confirm, I've seen it with my own eyes. There's a part of that cabinet that's swollen almost 200% of its original width.
I think it's salvageable. The most
I think it
important
is.
parts of the cabinet are there. The art is flawless. The trackballs are there. They're a bit gummed up, but we have a bearing rebuild kit for both trackballs. And the EMI cage and the harness and the power supply are all there. And thanks to Gleek, we picked up a RFI Shield PCB.
The one and only.
The one and only. So in theory, aside from those pesky monitor brackets, I have a spare 13-inch K7000 monitor that we're going to stick in there. We have all the parts we need to really do that project. Just need some cabinet work and those brackets.
Awesome. Yeah, and for me, the active projects that I've got going on right now, the Missile Command cocktail that I actually did some work on today, brought that over to Liam, and we put it on the FPGA cat box. And what did it? I wrote. I'm check my notes. The Missile Command had 2 bad ROMs, and 1 RAM is bad too. At least that's the indication. Could be sockets, of course. Missile Command is famous for having bad sockets. I've got the golden T99 that I need to do something with. I need to fix the monitor and the board too. Troy from Troy's Restorations. Thank you for sending me a bunch of extra golden T, and I think there's at least 1 bowling PCB in this huge box of PCBs that he just sent me. Again, he probably considered them junk that was in his way, but I really appreciate that. I've got the Moon Patrol. That was a PCB that I brought that we weren't able to get to today. The 2 Qbert cabs. I have been working on the Qbert, like I mentioned, the transformer assembly and the power supply. I've got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more pickup videos to do that I won't talk about just yet. I've got the Pango. That next step on Pango, I've got to fill in the extra holes that were drilled into the metal control panel when it was converted to Time Soldiers. Oh, what else is going on? And the dig dug, of course. The next step there, I'm going to get everything sorted out with the power and leave it as a run for a little bit. Play that while I collect more things that I need to bring it back to a dig dug. And 7 more cabinets that haven't been revealed just yet, including 2 that Jeremiah alluded to earlier when we met down at Creamy Corner. And I gave him a claw machine, and he gave me 2 empty cabinets, both of which, at least one I'm really excited about. One I'll have to figure out something to do. But and in terms of parts that I need, the biggest thing I'm looking for, I mentioned already, is the Irish Kangaroo bezel / marquee glass. Again, either happy to buy an original, or I'll pay someone to scan an original to get it reproduced. Ollie from Arcade Art Shop in the UK, he already does the Irish bezels for Gravatar and for Dig Dug. It's the same dimensions and everything. We just need a high-res artwork file for that. So please reach out to me on any platform to help me if you've got a way to help me with that. I need a vent grill for a Qbert that goes on sort of the back, the vent. And I need things for projects that I haven't announced yet, so I don't want to spoil anything there. So yeah, I think with that, just sort of keeping an eye on the live chat here. It's going pretty great. I really appreciate everyone's participation there. And Stringer Film says, huge shout out to Mike Sandwich Arcade Monitor Repair for dropping a video today on it turns out the K7000 neck boards are backwards compatible, I guess, between the 19 and 25 inch versions. But I think that the big thing with Mike there is that he's been testing a reproduction K7000 neck board that Peter from Arcade Parts and Repair will be bringing out soon. So yeah, Bobby Broadway, thanks for joining. Awesome. Everybody's here. Really appreciate it. And with that, I think we can probably segue into the main topic of discussion. This is something, yeah. Let's hop on like a FaceTime or something, Cam, if you want to see my spreadsheet. I do have my spreadsheet open here that I'm referring to everything. It's got everything down to serial numbers and monitor models in each of these cabinets. So for the main topic of the episode, this is something that Jeremiah and Kay and Liam and I have been talking quite a bit behind the scenes. Just sort of, our stands and all this stuff. And basically, where, and everyone's got a different line, right? But where do you draw the line on originality, on being a purist versus being a pragmatist, between, when we're working on these machines? And it's not just arcade video games, right? It's also pinball machines. It's also redemption games. It's almost anything. And almost, this is probably applicable to lots of different hobbies too. Where do you draw the line when it comes to, sourcing artwork and parts like harnesses and controls, power supplies, monitors, PCBs, cabinets, sort of the whole way through. Lots of things have been going on, right, between, reproduction, cabinets, even just the shell, right? Like there's some folks that make really, really great ones. Like, for example, Fetish Boy makes incredible, reproduction cabaret cabinets and then puts all original guts on the inside. And obviously things like home arcades, like Arcade 1-Up and that sort of stuff. There was something recently with the Unico LCD that everyone was kind of, hyped up for. A lot of the reviews so far have been less than flattering, kind of not living up to expectations, potentially not living up to the sort of advertised specifications, which is maybe going to...
All right then.
Oh, every time that happens, I forget that it's not my microphone dropping. It's only my headphones. Goodness gracious. I need to, I deal with Bluetooth every day, like for a living, to the point where we tell customers when it's in a critical situation, don't rely on Bluetooth, use USB. But, yeah, so who knows what's going on with those LCD monitors. But, there's also great, reproduction stuff out there between, Charles Klein makes awesome harnesses. Places like, Phoenix Arcade and others make some great, reproduction artwork. And even just today, Liam's video with the gauntlet, Liam, dropped a not insignificant check, amount of money to, buy these. He wanted the real deal Atari logo joysticks, right? In theory, you could have just used almost anything in there. I think they're leaf switch, joysticks, right? But if you wanted the authenticity of the real thing, right? Same thing for me with the optical joysticks on my Bazaar Joust. So I know everyone's going to have a different opinion on this, on where you draw the line. But Liam, I don't know if you want to go first and sort of say, what kind of, big picture, what kind of approach do you take to, when to go with, keep it 100% original versus, you're happy with a reproduction maybe?
There's an axis of this that's restoration quality desired. This is something that Sam and I have talked about a lot as we've gone through our various projects, is especially with ones that we've gotten sort of out of the dump, is how good do we need this to look before it's quote unquote done? Like, take, for example, our Tron. We got it missing a lot of pieces. It came out of the snow. The cabinet was sort of destroyed. But we ultimately replaced the bare minimum that we could with reproduction parts in order to bring it back to a salvageable state. We left the side art. We left all the major components. The only artwork we replaced was the marquee and the back translite that sits behind the bezel shroud. But in other cases, like our joust, the side art was destroyed. It was not recoverable. I mean, you could still see that it was a joust, but we ended up stripping it down and we completely redid the cabinet. The only artwork original to that specific cabinet left is the bezel. We had a new marquee, new CPO, completely re-stenciled the sides, and it has all new internals because it was an empty shell. But you sort of had to make do with what you've got. You're not really going to find original CPOs lying around, so it seems like in the community that everyone agrees a reproduction CPO is okay if your CPO is destroyed. But that same attitude is not conveyed to parts like marquees, or very much not PCBs, even though they're still technically just parts. So it is curious to speculate why. I have a J-Rock in Robotron. I don't like that I have a J-Rock in Robotron, and I would like to replace it with Robotron boards at some point. But for now, it's a serviceable solution.
My 4-year-old wasn't able to tell the difference. He was playing Robotron today on your Robotron, and he didn't complain about input lag or anything like that.
Well, that's the point, right? It's an FPGA. That's also part of the sort of scales of difference. If you put Robotron on a 60-in-1 and tried to play it, you'd probably notice something. But not with an FPGA. The only way to tell, really, for me, is sound. Just because it doesn't have quite the same amplification quality that the Robotron PCBs would.
So what do you think that dividing line is, right? You know, like I liked how you phrased it earlier, and I don't know if it was you or Sam that came up with the sort of, you know, restoration quality, you know, reproduction, right? Because there's also lots of different, you know, levels of quality, right? You can get, you know, relatively, you know, cheap like inkjet artwork all the way to, you know, screen printed from the original screens. You know, some of the reproduction art shops have purchased from, you know, from like the Atari estate or something like that.
Some of it, I think a lot of that discussion really was with Sam. I mean, when you there's the discussion of patina, right? If you're going to completely restore an arcade game, and I say restore sort of in the loose sense, if you're going to transform a machine into something that resembles what it may have looked like from the factory, you are losing something. It may not be something of value to you, but the patina of a game tells a story. You can sort of see some events that may have happened in its history, and if you're removing that, you're not only removing the original artwork and repainting something that looks similar but is new, you are removing that story. And that was something that we sort of wrestled with, because we like to have the machine tell that story. And if you are going to replace, you obviously want to do it with whatever the best thing that you can get is, because you have the potential to make it worse. It's not like you can it's a guaranteed if you replace something, it's going to make the cabinet better. You do have the potential to make something irreparably worse, because anytime you do a replacement like that, you lose something, especially if you're stripping artwork like the side art or the control panel overlay or something like that.
Is that like it's only original once versus upgrades?
Yes, it's only original once. So most of our machines are as original as we could do with what we had.
Well, and you know, I think part, like you were saying, like the community seems to be much more accepting of reproduction CPOs, let's say, than marquees, right? And I wonder if there's a part of it has to do with things that are designed to be worn out and replaced eventually, right? Like CPOs, right? They're going to get worn.
Willis existed. Willis
exactly
is
right.
They specialized in CPOs.
but there weren't like marquees aren't designed to be worn out, right? Like, yeah, they can burn up, depending on, heat or whatever from the light. But I don't think there were, contemporaneous, you could get a replacement marquee, like if it was smashed or something. But I don't think Willis like made, marquees or that sort of thing.
Willis
So maybe
made
like
CPOs, they made side art, but not as many, but it was mostly CPOs.
And I wonder if it's like, in the car or motorcycle restoration hobby, if, things like, hey, like you buy, you go to buy, let's say like a classic, right? Like you don't expect it to have the original brake pads from, 1957, right? Because those things are, or probably even the tires, right? Those are
Hopefully
meant to,
you'll have the oil changed.
You'll have the oil change, right? But like, the steering wheel might wear out, right? Like the grip on it might wear. But if you replaced it, if somebody was selling you a mint, car from, whatever, muscle car, 50s, 60s, whatever. And if it had a steering wheel from, AutoZone, right, you'd feel like it was not quite, what it was originally, right? But like you expect it to have, brake pads and whatever type things replaced, right? Kay, I think, given the sort of business that you're in, you might have a slightly different perspective. So why don't you lay it on us?
So I don't tend to do a whole lot of full restorations. I don't really advertise machines as being fully restored. Whenever I come across artwork and things like that are just janky, I do not shy away from using reproduction CPOs, side art, bezels, marquees, stuff like that. If the end result looks better than the previous one, then that's certainly something I'm going to do. I will tell you that doing this from a business standpoint, the majority of customers don't know the difference between original and reproduction in the first place and don't care. If it's pretty, then it's better than not being pretty. So that's usually my guideline is if it will be improved by doing some reproduction stuff, then I'll do the reproduction stuff. I don't shy away from it.
Well, and I'm really curious on that point too, right? Like how much of a difference does it have to be for it to make sense, right? Like if you have an original and it's let's say in B condition, right? Would that be worth replacing to get a reproduction that's in, A+ condition? Like how far does that delta have to be?
It just depends on each individual component. So like if the CPO usually say just a centipede, for example, almost every centipede I've ever picked up has a huge piece of the CPO missing right around the trackball just because it's all been worn away. Maybe the rest of the CPO is in decent shape, but right around the trackball is just worn to just bare metal. I will replace that just because it's going to look so much better to have a replacement on there. As long as you do it right, not only are most people not going to know the difference, but most people aren't going to care. If you show the before and after, they'll definitely prefer the after. Side art, if it just has like some scratches and stuff in it, or maybe like some discoloration or whatever, I'll probably leave it. But if there's chunks missing out of it, if it's only half of side art, the rest of it's just been ripped off, I'll go ahead and replace it with something new. It's just like if I replace one component, I don't have to replace all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I can just replace the marquee, I can just replace the CPO, and I can leave the rest as is. It's just whatever looks so bad, I can't leave it that way. I'll replace, but I don't have to do an entire machine.
Stringer Films dropped another $200 million super chat donation to add that he refuses to purchase cabs without original fuses, which is kind of funny because I was working on the Qbert transformer assembly, and I'm always tempted to leave original fuses in there. I figure they've earned their right to stay, right? They've been doing a great job. But usually if I have the correct fuses on hand, I'll replace them with, fresh ones just because I feel like, I don't know, it's maybe bad luck to leave the fuses in there. But then I wouldn't be able to have awesome experiences like Jeremiah has that leads to these t-shirt designs. But thank you again, Stringer, for that. Really, really appreciate it. And Kay, just to continue this, I'm curious, like how often, when you're talking to a customer, you're talking to a client, right? And they're kind of telling you what they want, what they're looking for, whatever. How often does the average customer bring up, do they sort of like say, hey, I want it to be original, or I want it to look mint, or what is that conversation? How does that typically go?
Usually, if someone is seeking a specific game, they just want an original dedicated cabinet. And it usually doesn't mean like all the components still have to be original. They basically want an original cabinet that works. And so whatever I've got to do to it to get it to that point, they're usually okay with. And if it's something that I'm restoring specifically for a certain customer who's already paid a deposit and is looking for this, certain machine, I'll basically ask permission, like, hey, this is what this part looks like. This is what a reproduction looks like. Do you want me to make the swap? And the answer is almost universally yes. Very rarely like, no, even though it's only halfway there, I still want it that way. No, they want it to look nice. So internals are different, but we'll get to that. But when it comes to the external artwork, they almost always would rather look better than the original if the original just looks like trash.
Okay, and Frog Puppet comes over the top with a $500 million super chat donation to say he has to have those original cigarette stains too. And like, to me, that's another sort of, what a mark that this is an original thing from the 80s, right? Like almost every control panel I have here, unless the CPU has been replaced, has some sort of cigarette, burn on the control panel from either just, placing a lit cigarette there while you, quickly die 3 times in Ms. Pac-Man, or some games you could even hold a cigarette between your fingers while, playing the game. So Frog Puppet, thank you for that super generous donation. And
when it comes to cigarette stains and especially tax stamps, I try to leave those just because, like Liam said earlier, they tell a story. Unless the cigarette stains are like in a certain pattern that spell FU or something like that, I'll probably leave them. Or if they've actually like burned into the Lexan and just left a whole bunch of dimples everywhere, I'll probably end up replacing that. But when it comes to tax stamps, even if I'm like repainting a cab, I'll paint around them because I want to leave the tax stamps so you can see the history of the machine and where it's been, and who's played it.
And speaking of that, I noticed on that gauntlet that's just over Liam's shoulder, there's a couple of tax stamps from Mississippi on that cabinet, which is kind of neat. Most of the ones that I see are like West Virginia, South Carolina, that sort of thing.
We picked up that gauntlet actually in North Carolina. So it had made its way from an arcade in Mississippi to an arcade in North Carolina before it made it to Bradford, Virginia, and then up here to Maryland.
Very cool. Chance in the live chat from the Canadian Arcade says power cords are also a consumable. I agree too. I end up replacing most of the power cords and almost all the time the plug, right? So even if the power cord itself is in good shape, usually the plug is all messed up or the ground prong has been cut. So I now buy replacement power plugs by the case. And Mike from Mike's Amateur Arcade Monitor Repair says nice pun there. I refuse to not replace fuses. We got something big coming in the Sky Skipper project with Chance, but cool. And so Jeremiah, right? Maybe you can add some sort of sanity to this mix here, right? Do you fall more on the purist side or the pragmatist side, or how do you look at all this?
Well, it all depends on who the game is for and what the game is. So I don't have any sort of reproduction game PCBs in any of my machines, but I am 100% down to throw a brand new switching power supply into anything, even if it's a power supply that works or that can easily be fixed. I know with the switching, I'm sort of future-proofing this, not only for myself, but for whoever inherits this machine when I inevitably die in a few years. You can just swap a new switcher right into that, and you're on your way. You don't have to sit there and troubleshoot everything. Artwork is a bit of a different matter. So we've all mentioned the distinctions between the control panels and like the side art or the marquees. I think everything I've got right now has a reproduction control panel on it because those get worn out. And they get worn out in such a way that they start flaking and little bits come off on your hand every time you play it, or it's getting worse and worse. Something like that, I'm willing to 100% replace it. And for most games, you've got a viable reproduction. The issue comes with stuff where you don't have a great reproduction, or like Charlie mentioned, no reproduction at all. If you've got no reproduction at all, well, I mean, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. Just deal with what you've got. But so like my Super Pac-Man, the original glass bezel that it came with, the paint was flaking, and it was so bad that it wasn't something you could repaint and reseal. It needed to be replaced. The replacement that I got, it's from Escape Pod, so it's not exactly ideal. It's kind of pixelated, but it is what it is, and it's the best I can get, so I'm content with it. My main focus is to make the game itself run exactly like it did, because we're talking about games that did have cigarette burns and things like that. It was never ideal except for the day it came out of the factory. So I'm not too concerned about preserving ideals. Along with that, we've also got things like updated ROMs that save high scores and things, or the ROMs don't save the high scores, but you know what I mean. High score save kits and things like that. As long as the game plays the way it did originally, I'm content with that. But that means that something like a 60-1, I'm not a big fan of. I did a 60-1 comparison on the Pac-Man cocktail video, and I showed that there's some really big sound differences in some of those games. And for something where you're preserving antiquity like this, I would especially like the sound to be particularly the same way it was back in the day. Now, I'm not going to go so bad as to say that you can't replace the speaker wiring or something like that, but I do want something that's 95% the same in the gameplay. The aesthetics of the cabinet itself, I'm willing to compromise on. But now we have, I recently did the 100-year-old claw machine. The issue with that was that the 120-volt motor, AC motor, was completely worn out and unusable. And the actual circuits of how that machine runs was built around the fact that that motor, when it loses power, does not immediately stop. It winds down, and it winds down long enough that a wheel on this is able to hit another switch. Well, I replaced it with a 12-volt DC motor. That stops instantly as soon as power is cut. So I had to rewire the entire circuit on that thing to make it work with this. The end product, though, is that now this runs just like it did back in the day. There's nothing, you don't have to hit another button to make it work or anything like that. But the internals are different. In my opinion, the fact that it runs now sustainably with a motor you can get, again, you can buy a new motor, new power supply, all that. It'll all be replaceable in the future. The fact that even though it's got replacement new parts and a different circuit, the fact that it still plays exactly like it did back in the day is what is most important to me. So that's my opinion on repros. I think that's pretty middle of the road, which the rest of us are sort of middle of the road on this as well.
Yeah, and I think you and I are pretty close on this too. And I think it's also captured again, Jerry Voluptuous with super generous $199 million super chat donation saying, preserve if you can, repro if needed. And that's kind of the mindset that I take, right? Like I'm willing to accept, like, I would say even a C quality original over a reproduction, right? And it's for, my own home, my own, friends and family are the ones that are playing it. And so I'll live with, little bits and pieces missing here and there, right? If it's totally, utterly, completely trashed, right? Like, sure, get rid of it, right? Like the buttons on my armor attack were really just all chewed up. Like somebody had, it looked like they had been picking at them with like a screwdriver or something, right? Trying to damage them or whatever. But like I have, my Play Choice control panel has a bunch of the, on the bend, it's all, messed up. I've got a Repro CPO that's just been sitting in a box because it just hasn't bothered me enough to replace it. Often I found, unless it's something rare, you can often find an original piece for close to what a reproduction, costs, right? So the Donkey Kong marquee I sourced separately from the cabinet, and that's in really good shape. I really didn't spend much on that. It's essentially the same as what a repro would have cost. The Joust marquee and bezel are both original that I sourced separately, again, from other collectors that had extras. The Armor Attack marquee is really kind of in maybe C plus shape. I got that for next to nothing in a lot of marquees, actually, from DJ DNS. Let's see. I've got other marquees on the shelf over there waiting for projects, like the Q-Bird over there I got from eBay for, again, essentially the same price as an original or as a reproduction. And all of those are, maybe B plus condition, but I do kind of value the original as much as possible. But absolutely, there's limits, right? Like one of the things that I've been dealing with recently has been, I've been doing so many deconversions that harnesses, have become sort of challenging to come up with. And for common games, you can often find original harnesses, not too bad. I got I almost said it. Probably it might be easy to determine. I think it's the only top 10 game that I haven't announced yet that I own. I got one of those from I might butcher his last name, but Jared Brissy on Facebook sold me at a great price. Or maybe I got it from him off of Clav. I can't remember. A marquee or a harness at a great price. I've gotten reproduction harnesses before from Charles Klein and from Ken Falta from Golden Age Arcade Parts. But those get pricey, right? Like often you're paying quite a bit for them. Was really running into issues getting a harness for the Qbert and maybe eventually two. Qbert, everything has been going through the roof price wise. I think I saw a Qbert harness that I was bidding on went for like $350 for the harness. Okay, crazy. There is somebody on Clav, the name escapes me, who repros Qbert harnesses. But Qbert harnesses are difficult to reproduce because the colors of the wire are all bizarre, right? There's like triple striped colors on them, right? They're almost all of them are white, but they have 3 stripes of color on them. And like a lot of the connectors are all like it was originally all IDC stuff, and so there are reproduction harnesses to get for Qbert, but they're super expensive. And with that one, you can't do what you can do sometimes, which is just get a JAMA PCB adapter and use a JAMA harness, right? So have an original PCB. Get a JAMA adapter for something between $20 and $50, depending on how complex it is. Some of them need onboard amps and whatever type of stuff, and just use a JAMA harness, right? So that's a reasonable compromise. You really can't do that for Qbert because of just how bizarre of a setup Qbert has, all the different voltages. Like people have attempted to do it, and it's just a mess. So I was fortunately able to find I haven't tested it yet, but it looks okay, a cheaper Qbert harness originally. So like, now that, maybe we can start talking about the insides too, as my headset dies again. For the stuff that's on the outside, you want it to be, no, it won't come back on. There we go. You want it to look as good as possible, but what do you do on the inside in terms of originality, right? Like, do you go, bone stock original all the way, no matter the cost? Do you go the complete opposite end of the spectrum and put a 60-in-1 and a JAMA harness in there, or all kinds of different things in between? There are awesome now, FPGA-based boards like the JRock, the BitKit, and the BitKit keeps adding, more and more games. It's been adding a bunch of horizontal games, including MCR games. I think the Tron is still kind of in beta as he's working out exactly how to support, different types of spinner encoders. Or do you kind of do the, like I was saying, original PCB, but with a JAMA adapter, or do you just say, full and all the way, right? So, you started to allude to this a little bit, Kay. What do you typically do when it comes to the internals of the cabinet?
So with most classic arcade machines, I will try to keep the internals as original as possible, just because whenever you use reproduction stuff, you can tell when you're trying to play the game, especially when it comes to monitors. I will not put a flat screen in a Pac-Man. There's just, you can tell. You can absolutely tell. But I will put a flat screen in a lot of 90s racers that have medium resolution monitors. So like a Hydro Thunder or Cruisin' USA. If I can't find a 25-inch monitor to put in there, or like if the original's necked or missing, because a lot of times they're just straight up missing, I'll put a flat screen in there and it'll look relatively okay. With games that are medium res or high resolution, the transition into a flat screen isn't nearly as extreme as putting one in a Pac-Man. PCBs and things like that, I try to keep the originals in there as best I can. But sometimes, if it's a particularly rare game, you just can't find the parts you need, or you just can't find a replacement, or someone has done a poor conversion to it and everything's missing, or harnesses, things like that. I'm not above putting in a JAMA harness with an adapter to use an original board. I'll absolutely do that. The way I see it, unless you take off the back door and look inside and tell the difference, if you can play the game and not be able to tell the difference, then it's completely acceptable to make those changes. I will keep a CRT in there. I'll keep the original board in there if I can, but if the reproduction board is high enough quality that even the most dedicated, purist can't tell the difference just by playing the game without seeing inside of it, I'll absolutely do that.
Liam, right? You mentioned earlier your Robotron has a J-Rock, but you're looking forward to the day that you can replace that with an original board set. What drives you to this level of madness?
Sound for Robotron in particular. I will admit I'll go above and beyond to try to preserve the original internals. Like Firefox behind me, Sam spent a long time helping me, and she designed a new jig to help us put back together the Laserdisc player on Firefox, which is not reliable, and we could obviously use a Dexter or something instead of it. But we spent a whole lot of time trying to fix not only that Laserdisc player but the original monitor in there. For Robotron, we have the J-Rock, and obviously it's a tenable solution. I like to play Robotron. I want to play Robotron, and I can't find boards, so J-Rock was available. But the issue for me is I still can tell, and I can tell because of the sound. The sound is a very important aspect to me when playing a classic game like this, and if a game doesn't have good sound, no matter how good the gameplay is, it sort of fails as a game in my eyes. And so I don't know what games I would be happy to replace with a alternate solution, not a J-Rock or an FPGA. I am actually struggling to think. Perhaps sort of 90s games, sort of like what Kay said. For the early 80s, if I can find an original board set, that would be the way to go, in my opinion. Especially for anything vector, although there are now more multi-vector PCBs available. Yeah, I think fighters I don't necessarily care about, so that would be where I would draw the line. But I think that is partially because of not my preference, but prejudice against the genre, that I would be willing to stoop to that level.
Well, and I wonder on that particular point, right? Like fighters and some other genres are notorious for, especially at the competitive level, like you want frame perfect, input, no lags, whatever. So I don't know if Kay, if you ever cater to audiences like that, that maybe, arcades or bars that host, competitive fighting tournaments, does that sort of, community tend to go original hardware, original, CRTs? I know most of the competitive players will have their own controller setup, right? But what are they actually running in terms of game hardware?
Most of the hardcore fighting enthusiasts don't care that much, but some of them do. I know the Pandora's box in particular has all the Street Fighters and stuff like that, but one of the most popular Street Fighters is Third Strike, and there's a huge competitive group for that. And the Third Strike that you can play on Pandora's box is not great. There's a lot of lag. There's some frame skipping. Even the music doesn't. It kind of sounds like it's lagging a little bit. It's just a little bit stuttered. And so I like Third Strike. I'm not a competitive fighting game by any means. I like Third Strike, and I'll play Third Strike on my multicade that runs a Pandora's box and enjoy it just fine. But I can tell the difference, and I assume that if I were trying to, enter a tournament and try to win some money, those differences would really bother me. So I think that if it's something that you're purchasing for an actual tournament use, you would absolutely have to have original hardware in it. Get your CRT, get your CPS3 board, playing whatever you want, spend your $1,500 trying to get everything original, and enjoy your game. But for my average customer, they just want something that plays Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and they're happy.
For the
There
love
you
of
go.
God, if you're restoring a Donkey Kong, use a black joystick.
Well, I was going to save that for a little bit later, but we can, there's a reason that there are separate world record tables for, original hardware versus MAME. And then, for those original hardware records, how original does it need to be, right? Do the buttons matter, right? Do those, if you want to talk about, 4-way versus 8-way joystick, I totally get that. But does the joystick need to be, what if it's been worn in a way, right, that has sort of over time made it an 8-way joystick just from repetitive strenuous use? Does it need to have been lubricated with the correct Shin Etso whatever Japanese bearing lubricant that Nintendo called for? Does it need to have the original weight springs in the buttons, or are weaker springs okay? How far does this madness go? And Jeremiah, for your sort of current conundrum, somebody once told me that pride cometh before the fall, right? You've been beating your head against a wall, and hopefully not throwing Molly around, trying to get these pack boards working, right? And I don't think anyone has suggested that you throw a 60-in-1 in there, but I have offered, because of a project I haven't announced yet, I have a spare, what I believe to be working original Bally Midway Ms. Pac-Man board set that I have offered to send you. I would probably just for free with shipping, right? But you are stubbornly insisting on it will be a huge ding, you'll view it as a huge stain on your character if you're not able to get this original board working, the board that originally came with your cabinet. So what drives you to go to those lengths?
Well, my character has far more stains than any Pac-Man board will do to it, so let's just get that out of the way.
Are they cigarette stains?
Yeah, well, cigar stains. I have a little more class than cigarettes. Anyways, that's because I cannot conscience the idea of releasing the part 2 of the epic Pac-Man restoration saga and disappoint our beloved Cameron McCaslin. This has become the thing where, like, if I can't fix this hopefully being my last PCB I repair, we know that's not going to be. If I can't fix this, I've failed to excel in this hobby. So that's why I'm fixing that. As far as like hardware reproductions, I've got the House of the Dead there. That's a really complicated board. As far as I know, there's only one guy out there right now who can fix that if something goes wrong. So if that goes down and I spend a Saturday working on it. Is that the
iFix Sega guy?
Exactly. If that goes down and I spend a Saturday and I can't fix it, FPGA is going in that thing. I love the antiquity of this stuff, but I have a limited amount of time and money on Earth, and I don't want to waste 5 times the time and money to get the same result or 95% of the same result. So, yeah, I'm willing to go with repro hardware if the difference in cost and time is that massive. But it is an emotional thing to make that call. Like, I don't mean emotional in the sense that I'm crying, but you kind of feel like, is it worth it to me? If this was like a game that my grandpa owned and he always loved playing on these ROMs and this board, I'd probably put more effort into it. But with some crap that I found in a dumpster, I'm willing to throw something else in there if I'm looking at like $500 or $1,000 to fix it otherwise.
You make a great point also regarding like an emotional connection and what would drive you to make a game. Joust. It's intensely it was a personal journey because Joust was my dad's favorite game that he played with his brother, and my dad passed away a few years ago, actually to the day, and the Joust was the only game he talked about. So we went above and beyond trying to restore this thing. And we wanted to put a little nameplate on it to be like in memory of my dad's name. But we ended up putting that on the attract screen because Joust offers that setting. So
instead of presented by Williams Electronics, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was just we spent so much time. I spent, I don't know, almost a month, more than a month, stenciling that cabinet and trying to make sure that everything looked as nice as possible from basically an empty shell. And would I have done that if I didn't have the connection to the game through him that it meant enough to do that? I don't know.
And it's incredible that that's for you. That's coming from a place of love and something very special and important to you, and not just a hypothetical cover for your stubbornness, like with Jeremiah. And instead of like with Major Havoc, they had the updated ROMs that they called the Promised End. The final part of the Mizpac saga for Jeremiah's channel could be titled The Bitter End. He finally, like Moby Dick, right? He finally bested the white whale that he's fighting with. Oh, and yo, Eddie, thanks for joining. I actually have 2 questions I wrote down that you asked that we need to answer, but so we have to come back and watch the rest later. And also, I want to thank again Stringer Films for another $200 million super chat donation to troll us with a comment saying that he puts stock arcade 1-up joysticks in all of his cabs. And it's funny that Stringer Film says this because a lot of it actually goes in the opposite direction, right? You start to see now, people modifying arcade 1-ups and putting, in some cases, restoration quality reproduction, like original stuff in them, right? Like, much better Star Wars flight yokes, Tempest spinners, that sort of thing. And that actually triggered a little bit of back and forth in the live chat. People, modding out their 1-ups. Chance from the Canadian arcade saying the worst is quote unquote upgrading 1-ups, like putting lipstick on a pig. And that's something that's been very interesting, to me. Right. And I've got nothing against arcade 1-ups, right? Just like I've got nothing against console games and console collecting and that sort of thing. I have plenty of console games, as you can see here. I love my Play Choice 10, which kind of bridges that divide. And, I will admit that I own 3 arcade 1-up cabs. They are not in this room. They don't belong here. They're in my kids' playroom. One of them I got for free with airline miles when nobody was flying during COVID. But, I certainly have no issue with them. What I think is, and I've actually been on some arcade 1-up podcasts and videos. I'm friendly with like Retro Ralph and She Lion, who, a lot of them do both. Our own, friend of the podcast, Cameron McCaslin, he's got a number of arcade 1-ups, and I think he might have to form an LLC soon because he says he keeps buying 1-ups for $100 and selling them for over 300. So I've got nothing, with that. And I see those as a good, like one of the reasons I like engaging with that community is part of, evangelizing the true religion of coin-op games, right? And as I see that as almost like a gateway to, you're not sure you want to jump in with 2 feet and buy a full-size machine and have to get into the maintenance of it. Just like if you want a classic motorcycle, you better know how to repair a classic motorcycle or be willing to pay a ton of money to somebody else to keep it up and running. So I've got no issues with any of that. But one thing that really just confuses me, and not in a negative way, right? I'm just really confused by a lot of the the rationale that people provide as the reason that they go with a 1-up instead of an original full-size machine is the size and the cost and the maintenance and all that kind of stuff. But then often the people that are saying that have a room full of a dozen arcade 1-ups that have been modded to Kingdom Come and maybe have, they've put $1,000 of work into each of them. Often that requires,
look like the old arcades too, and they got the black lights and everything. It's like completely
right.
the contrast.
So like
little McDonald's arcades that they have. Yeah.
So it's like in the space that you've got maybe a dozen arcade 1-ups, you could probably fit at least half a dozen, full-size cabinets, right? All of the money that you've sunk into them with upgrades and mods and whatever, you're now, and to me, like, I'm going to do an episode. I keep promising on like how I find amazing deals. I spend less on my coin ops than I would if I was buying arcade one-ups, right? Like, you know, it's not as available. You can't just walk into a Walmart and buy them. You've got to be more active in your searching and negotiating and all that kind of stuff. But and then like even on the maintenance side, I totally get that too. These things, you know, do require, you know, care and love and feeding in order to keep them running. But a lot of that is not, you know, super advanced stuff, right? We're not necessarily talking about like vector repair or PCB repair, but like, you know, oh, you know, the you know, wire on this going to this joystick broke, you know. So like a lot of these mods on the arcade one-up side involve, you know, soldering and reading schematics and doing that sort of thing. So it's almost like maybe that was the initial sort of entry point for them to get into, you know, home arcades because of those things. But they ended up kind of coming full circle, getting a whole room full of these things. And then they're like, I went through basically, you know, they went through basically the same amount of trouble and cost and space and everything, where they could have just gone with, you know, coin op. But maybe it was just too intimidating at first to get into that. And I can totally understand that arcade one-ups are a lot less intimidating from like an upfront, you know, commitment that you're making. And like Stringer Films here says that one-ups got him into full size. And I've heard that from quite a lot of folks too. So I think that's a pretty common experience. Kay, have you ever had any customers asking you about one-ups or people trying to sell you one-ups or anything like that?
I constantly have people trying to sell me one-ups and asking if I repair them, and I don't. I probably could, but I have a 9-month backlog on actual arcade machines as it is. I don't need to add one-ups to that lineup.
Maybe in 20 years.
Yes, yeah, in 20 years, whenever those things have just deteriorated into piles of dust, then you can go ahead and bring them to me. But half the time, someone will message my page, be like, "Hey, I have an arcade machine I'd like to sell." I'm like, "Okay, send me pictures," and they send pictures, and it's a one-up. I'm like, "No, I don't deal in those."
Well, what do you say? Like, how do you explain it to someone that doesn't know the difference?
I say I don't deal in one-ups. That's all I tell them, and they usually figure it out from there. The only beef I have with one-ups is that people try to sell them to me, and they clog up my my search histories. Because I'll be looking for actual arcade machines and on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and then, you know, just a bunch of one-ups pop up, and they try to tell me, "Oh, it's an arcade machine." No, it's not. But nice try.
And you know, I think all of us, you know, surprisingly, or we've talked about this before, that all of us are, I think, you know, below the median in terms of age of people who are in this hobby, right? Like, you know, we've all got channels. We can look at the demographics, and most of my viewers are a little bit, you know, older than me. I'm the oldest, I think, of the bunch at 41. And for, I think, Jeremiah and Liam are the two youngest of the bunch. In your sort of interaction with, you know, folks of your age, right? Like in their 20s and 30s, right? Like, what's their perception, right? Do they see the sort of difference between, you know, arcade one-ups and the original, you know, real deal? You know, having not, you know, grown up in the 80s, maybe they caught some of the, you know, 90s kind of arcade stuff. Do they know the difference? Do they care about the difference? What's that mindset like?
Yeah, what's a child's opinion?
We should ask your children.
As the resident child of this group, I think I can speak on this. So the only people I know who are my age that even, you know, care about these things at all, care about it because I'm into it and they watch the show, the Coin Up Corner. And I've got a particular friend, Joey, if he's watching. He's not watching. He does Airbnbs, and he's talked to me about putting one of these in an Airbnb. And after talking through it, I ended up recommending, like, just put an arcade one-up in there. Because for the intention that you have, just to have something fun in this space, that's going to be your cheapest and most reliable bet, at least for the short term. Most of the people who have any passing interest in this, they're going to be completely satisfied by a one-up or a 60-in-1 or anything like that. Like, they don't care the way we do about preserving the antiquity unless there's some kind of weirdo like we are.
Yeah, it's a similar story. All of our friends, I don't know if they've played one-ups in the past, but if you come here and play these games, you're subject to a healthy dose of coin-up evangelism going on in this arcade. So I've never heard any of my friends talk about one-ups or how this plays just like a one-up, or I don't even know if they've played them. So they do seem to appreciate the machines that are here when they come and visit them.
But you do, like, you were even talking about how you and Sam recently hosted an arcade party at your new place, and you had a bunch of coworkers come over.
Yeah.
When they come over, do any of them express an interest of, hey, I wonder if I could get one of these for my house, or I've seen this in Walmart, maybe I should get one?
No, well, at least not in the sense of I've seen one at Walmart. Several have asked me now to bring the Asteroids cocktail to work and just keep it in the lab because they really like the vector display and the phosphor trails that the Asteroids cocktail in particular leaves as you shoot. And one of them has a pinball machine that they've been talking about, but not really. They seem to sort of, a lot of them more mystified when they came in and saw the games that didn't really know how to play some of the games. But it was a good introduction and a good sort of experience, I think, for everyone to sort of play games that they hadn't played. One of the things we did was take an inspiration from summer camp. We had a tournament with specific games picked out and had people play those games so that they could enjoy ones that they otherwise would not have played.
Do one of the things that I've heard from people in this sort of with these sort of exchanges is somebody will ask them, hey, can you help me find one, right? And you say, let's say it's like a Tron, right? They're like, hey, if you can find me a good deal on a working Tron, right, let me know, right? And you'll come back and say, hey, I found you a great deal on a working Tron. It's $1,200. And like, wow, that's so much more. That's so much more than I would want to pay for something like that.
Nobody has a concept of how much money either these things cost when they work, or how much money and time and effort. Because time and effort is money that you put into these things to get them to work. If you get them for a crazy cheap deal and they were dead,
but if you enjoy that, right? If you
you enjoy it,
like for me, I enjoy working on and fixing these just as much, if not more, than playing them, right? So to me, I would rather buy a broken cabinet for $100 and spend $900 to bring it back to life rather than to just buy a working one for $1,000. But that probably is because there's something wrong with my brain chemistry or wiring. Yeah. Let's see. I know Yo Eddie has jumped out of the live chat, but he was asking earlier specifically about switching power supplies versus linear power supplies. Kate, do you ever go through the trouble of trying to fix an original linear power supply, or do you just always go straight to the switcher if it's not working?
Nope, I'll throw a switcher in there. Typically, they make adapters, so you don't have to do any wiring work, and just attach an adapter to your switcher and call it good. Sometimes I don't even feel like buying the adapter, and I'll just cut up the wiring and make it work because people don't care. They really don't.
Yeah. They're just going to bring it back to you anyway if it needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah, as I say, and then even if that's the case, then you just put a new switcher in it and you just move the wires from the old one to the new one. So why would you have to go all that work?
Those original plastic connectors. Those original plastic connectors. They're so precious.
What about ones like where the power supply isn't just a power supply, like an AR board, right? Or what about something like a Q-board that's got a bunch of bizarre voltages that a typical switcher isn't going to provide?
So for things like that, I'll rebuild the original power supply if I can. But most games don't need anything more than 5, 12, and -5. So, switcher does the job. But I've come across ones that do need some very unique voltages. Some of them use like 3 volts AC. I ran into one like that before. And then when it comes to like AR2s and stuff like that, AR2s are pretty plentiful. If the one I have isn't good and I can't fix it, I can replace it with a different one and it'll be fine. But if it's just something that I can replace with a switcher and an adapter, then that's more cost efficient. It's easy to repair if it breaks again. And I wouldn't say it's more reliable, but it's easier to deal with.
And it cracked me up the first time I ever opened up a Centauri cabinet. This was one my buddy has. It's a Circus Charlie that was converted to a Taito Alcon, which is just sort of almost a generic kind of vertical scrolling shooter. I open it up and I see the power supply in there, and I'm like, is this some sort of ancient like switching power supply, right? Because because this was a conversion, and I think Alcon is JAMA and it had been tied into this power supply, but Centauri used switching power, like even in the early 80s, they used a primitive switching power supply that looks a little bit like a, is it Peter Cho sort of standard looking power supply, but it looks almost like an ancient artifact version of that. What about Liam and Jeremiah, more purists on the side? Do you guys go full linear, or do you ever throw a switcher in?
Not one of our games that has original boards and should have a linear supply has a switcher instead. The only of our classic machines that has a switcher in it is Robotron, because it has the J-Rock. But if we ever got a Robotron board set, I have a Robotron power supply minus the heat sink in the closet. So that would be used in that case. We've gone to links to try to fix these. Centipedes died literally a few days ago and repaired it. Bad 2M355. Firefox has got 2 of those in it, and they had to be tuned simultaneously, 2 ARs in Firefox. We did restore the this was actually the most effort. People told me to call it quits and get a switching power supply, but Tron had a massive amount of corrosion on the wiring harness and on the power supply. And I think months were spent on and off trying to debug Tron and fix it. I ended up cutting the harness, I think 8 inches away from the power supply, and creating entire new heads, resoldering every wire to new sockets, and rebuilding the power supply completely, as well as the suitcase. And it works. It is still running on its original power supply, which had a lot of acid damage. But it is working. So, and I just saw a comment from Cameron about Laserdisc players. Actually, yes, we have, as mentioned in the Firefox video, we had 3 Laserdisc players. Unfortunately, one did not survive the rebuild process, but the other one did. And we do have a spare semi-working Laserdisc player. It just needs to be tuned up to be as good as the one that's in our machine.
Jeremiah, I'm curious about, and I know this is spoiling a future episode, but you already talked a little bit about with the anti-claw having to go to a modern motor. What did that look like power supply wise, right? Like I must have had a very, very primitive power supply inside, from the 30s, but what was that like to get that back up and running?
So that machine, everything on it ran on 120 volts. There was no power supply. There was no transformer. It was all 120 volts on or off was the whole way the thing works. And I'll get more into that in the video itself, because it is complex, but also simple and to the point. But for that one, I just popped a 12-volt power supply in there, and where it initially would send 120 volts straight to a motor, it's sending that 120 volts to a power supply instead, and then that's sending 12 volts to the DC motor. But to get to the power supply question for the other machines, so Liam says anything that's supposed to have a linear power supply does not have a switcher. In my case, anything that originally had a linear power supply now has a switcher, including my Miss Pac-Man, because that is actually a converted Super Pac-Man. Super Pac-Man had a linear instead of a transformer, and now that's got a switcher in it. So any chance I have to throw a universal switching power supply in there, it's going in there. Like I mentioned, 100 years from now, well, those things will be dust in 100 years, but 50 years from now, someone can pop in a new switcher and get their game working again. So I have no interest in spending days of my limited time on Earth fixing a stupid old linear power supply just to give it the same 12 volts that a switcher will give it. So there's my opinion on that.
Okay.
There
Well, I mean,
are a few games that don't work with the switching power supplies very well, though. Like take for instance, Joust or Robotron. They tend to freak out unless you have specialized equipment attached to those switching power supplies.
No, that's a different case then. And if I can easily, if it's easier to put in a switcher than fix the linear, a switcher's going in there. That's my
Well,
philosophy.
I've put switchers in Williams games that have the adapter, and they seem to work okay for me, or I guess for the new owners.
and for me, like Liam, I've got all linears in games that came with a linear. I enjoy rebuilding power supplies, right? Like the thing that I'm always the most intimidated by, the three things I'm always most intimidated by: PCB repair, vector monitors, and trying to get artwork or cabinet like woodworking perfect. I'll work on raster chassis all day long, no problem. I'll work on linear power supplies all day. No, like I enjoy doing that. I think what I'm going to do though for the Dig Dug cocktail, right? It's got a switcher in there for the do run. I'm going to leave that switcher in there. I'm going to fix all the thing. I'm going to put an ISO in there. I'm going to put a line filter in there, a fuse, get all that done right. I don't think I'm going to go and get an AR2 to put it in there. I don't think I'm going to get an original Dig Dug cocktail harness, right? I'm never going to find one of those. So I'm just going to go JAMA with a PCB adapter, and that's going to be kind of the limit of my craziness. Like for me, I would say I'm a purist, but definitely with a pragmatic sort of limit, right? Like if it's going to balloon the cost of something, I'm not gonna do that, right? Like it's at a certain point, it would be cheaper to just buy another project that's complete, right? I'm trying to lean away from conversions or deconversion projects just because they tend to be more difficult. Cameron says if you're gonna jam it, just BitKit it. Maybe we'll get to that point. I've got, again, I haven't shown all of them. I've got a couple of JAMA cabinets now, and I'll likely maybe even get 2 bit kits and run one horizontal and one vertical. Another question we got from Yo Eddie, who has dropped out, is free play versus quarters, right? Speaking of originality in this case, right? He says he only runs quarters in his arcade. Free play is not allowed. For your guys' home collections, the three of you, who runs quarters, who runs free play, who does what?
I guess I'll go first. Everything is free play because I only have 3 machines anyway. One of them is a multicade, so who cares? And then the pinball machines, you just hit the start button to go. No one really would notice the difference. If I handed them quarters like, here, you have to put these in, they'd be like, oh, okay, and then they just play. But it doesn't like enhance the experience for them or anything like that.
There are only a few games that I could think of in which quarters would enhance the experience. For us, our machines are all on free play here. The ones that don't have free play, such as Tron, are wired with a button to give it a credit. The only games I can really think of would be things like Gauntlet. Gauntlet is a quarter muncher. There is a satisfaction to putting a quarter in Gauntlet to get that extra life as your life dwindles away. And some people I've read on the forums will put like a coin bucket on one side of the room, and you have to go run back and forth if you need more quarters to shove into Gauntlet. Same thing with X-Men or any of these other big 4-player quarter muncher beat 'em ups. But we don't have it for here. We have buttons above each coin door for credit. Although in our machines, all the original coin mechs are intact. We could put them on credit should we have chosen to do so. But it's just a preference thing. I didn't want people having to finagle quarters, and I didn't want to deal with cleaning out coin jams.
There's a merit to that because I had a Gauntlet Dark Legacy in my own collection for a while, and just having it on free play kind of took away the appeal of the game. Like there was no danger, there was never worrying about running out of health or anything like that. It just kind of killed the vibe, and it just became a slog to get through that game when there was no danger in playing it.
What do you got there, Jeremiah?
It ain't called Free Play Corner. So some of these games, especially like electromechanical ones, if you were to just wire a switch into the coin switch, you run the risk of somebody holding that longer than the duration that a coin would hit that switch. And with EM machines, that runs the risk of setting the whole circuit off in a way that it was never designed to work with. So, and then I've got some games that are just purely mechanical. There's no way to make it work without a coin being put into this mechanism unless you significantly modified it beyond the original designer's intent. So, and combine that with the fact that like it's just so satisfying, the sound of one of these quarters, first just jingling in general, but also running through a coin mech and splashing in the coin pan. That's part of the antique experience, in my opinion. But once again,
I agree. Mine's a little bit bigger, but I got. Yeah.
I guarantee you, I have more quarters than you do because I kept every single quarter for my arcade business because I never took them to the bank. It was too much effort, so I would always just transfer cash from one account to the other in the value of the coin. So I've got like $400 worth of quarters sitting around here, but
we'll cut this out.
I may or may not use one of these machines as a piggy bank.
There you go. Well, and I've got like I haven't touched it since I did the pickup video, but what else is new? That's basically what Overtime Arcade is all about. I got I actually got it from Jacklick, also another great YouTube channel. Jacklick's, I think, Arcade and Tech Repair Journey. I have one of the skinny row change machines that will eventually be replacing the big blue bucket of quarters that I've got here for my kids. My wife and I joke that we bribe our kids, or we should say incentivize good behavior with quarters, right? So, you don't want to clean up, you can have a handful of quarters, right? And where else are they going to spend it, right? They're not going to go to the corner store and buy a soda or something. And so the money just keeps going around in a circle. It's like a closed economy company store. But right, like there are limits to that. We have we've got games in multiple places in the house right now. The games that are in the kids' room now, Centipede and NBA Jam, those are on free play because I don't want to have multiple buckets. I don't want quarters kind of flying all over the house. Centipede has perfectly fine free play mode, right? Some games have terrible free play, right? Well, they'll just sit on the start screen waiting for you to press start. They won't cycle through the attract mode, and you'll just burn the heck out of your monitor. Centipede is great. It has perfectly normal attract mode, even with the stock free play from the machine. And with NBA Jam, right, I've got 4 kids, and they'll play, a 4-player, 4-quarter game, perhaps with overtime, and that's 50 quarters that they would have to drop into the machine to put a quarter per quarter, and then a quarter for overtime for 4 players is 4 times 5, 50 quarters or 20 quarters, and that's just way too many. So that's running on free play. I do have a game in the office at work. That's my class of 1981, but that's also the home version that doesn't have a coin door. I am planning on relatively soon moving the Donkey Kong Jr. cocktail that's right here under Jerry's pizza box to the office, and I bought that. Doesn't have I don't think it has free play at all built into the PCB. So I've got a free play kit from Brazington that I'm going to put onto that, which also kind of is a good segue into one of Sean's questions, which was, how does everyone feel about leaving your games powered on when they're not being played? Curious if some of the purists view that as a no-no to extend the life of original internals. And I know the guys all here give me grief for having my games running while I'm doing the podcast. And every month, this is probably the longest stretch, these 2 hours that the games are on. They come on every week, but they're usually on for maybe half an hour until the kids decide they want to play something else. I turn the games on when I'm doing the background for my intros and my videos. But these machines are meant to be played, meant to be on. However, the game that I have at my office at work, I work from home most days. I only go in a couple days a week. And every time I go in, the machine is on, right? And if I'm ever one of the last people to leave for the day, I make sure to turn it off just so that it's not running on not unnecessarily overnight. And every time I come in, and I'm sure it's being left on over the weekend, whatever. And I guess I'm not too worried about it, but it does have a burn-free 7200 in it. So maybe I should rotate that out at some point or put it on some sort of timer I could even control it from home if I wanted to over Wi-Fi. But I know, like, for example, Liam, you don't have your games on right now. I can't tell, but I don't think Jeremiah has his games on. So I don't think most folks don't have their games running anywhere near 24/7. I know, Kay, you put something in the chat about what you tell your customers that I thought was pretty insightful.
Yeah, the way I see it, these machines were meant to be run 16/7, not 24/7, and that was 20 or 40 years ago when those machines were new. Even with the replaced components, those machines, they don't need to be running 24/7 anyway. So I tell my customers, if you're not playing it, shut it off. There's no reason to have it on, draining your electricity and shortening the length of the components.
We have everything hooked into our smart home system, and the games themselves have idle timers. So if you're not playing it and enough time goes by, the system will warn us through notifications on our phones and then shut them off automatically if we don't respond. We have to disable it with party mode if we want to have them on for a longer period of time or have multiple on at once. And this is all because I left Tron on once for like 3 hours and didn't realize that it was still on. So I felt really bad about that.
I've got the two really old claw machines. I'll turn those on and leave them on all day because power is only running to the lights on those, and I just like to watch them. So this cocktail crane, if power runs to the lights, it's also running to the power supply and the circuit board. So I'll turn that on for the show because nothing in that is going to wear out with it just sitting there. Anything with a CRT, I only turn it on when I'm playing it, and I turn on just the one I'm playing. Every now and then I'll run all the games for a while. Just, I've heard that there are some issues you can encounter if a tube is not turned on for an extended period of time, and I'll turn everything on just to get past that. But no, I don't like the idea of leaving these consumable tubes running for an extended period of time when you're not actively enjoying them.
Whoop. Yeah. I like the ambiance, right? I feel bad that I don't have my pinball machines on, but I'm working on the play choice a little bit, so it's pulled out and disconnected. I think it's all part of the experience too, right? Like you've got, in my opinion, you got these things at home, you want to enjoy them, not just playing them, but also aesthetically, right? Like, it would the back, Jeremiah's background would look different if those claws, weren't turned on. There you go. And now Liam's going to step up to the challenge and for the last 10 minutes of the episode, run his game. So
no, I just turned on the black lights.
Oh, okay.
I'm not turning on the games. I'm not playing them. You just rejuve that monitor. I'm not going to burn it out.
Well, and if you turn on the Firefox, nobody will be able to hear you talk. Between the attract mode noise and the fans that sound like a jet engine spinning up. We got another
the second
question
time
from.
I'm proud of you, Liam.
There you go. And the black lights in there look really, really cool. Another question we got from Sean, who's also, I think, the newest channel member for Overtime Arcade. Thank you, Sean. Sean asks, what does everybody think about replacing monitor caps, flybacks, pots, that sort of thing? So I'm happy to go first there. So I only replace things if necessary, right? Like if I get a monitor and it's working perfectly as is, I'm just going to leave it, right? I'll make sure that everything's working. I'll test it, check the B+, right? I might even throw the rejuvenator onto the tube just to do some testing. But if it's working fine, like don't fix it if it ain't broke, right? But if there is some reason that I do need to fix it, right? Like one of the first things I'll do is a cap kit, right? For certain, like for the Geo7, kind of maybe an old wives' tale, right? But everyone says, or a lot of people say, if you do a cap kit on a Geo7 for the 19-inch, not the 13-inch, on the 19-inch, you might as well replace the flyback because the new caps are going to kill the original flyback anyway. Pots I usually leave as is, unless, again, there's some issue. Sometimes I'll pull the pot off and test it and spray some deoxit on it and work it back and forth. But if the pot's not working, I'll replace them. But I don't go and replace them if that's not necessary. And I don't see that necessarily as like a purist thing by any stretch. Like my Senate, like I think the only monitor down here that hasn't been touched at all is the Centipede monitor. I've done nothing to other than adjustments, but it has flaked out on me, which tells me at some point it is going to need to be rebuilt. But that's not a purist thing for me. That's more of like a laziness / again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I don't know what the rest of the guys do when it comes to that sort of thing. Maybe first, Kay, is there any sort of, like, again, because you're working with customers, right? And you're sending these machines, into their businesses, into their homes, and you want to make for less work for you and for them. So is there sort of any like standard preventative maintenance that you do for a monitor, or if it's working, do you leave it as is?
I do preventative maintenance because everything I sell comes with a warranty, and I don't want to see that machine again unless I'm buying it back. So for every monitor that comes through, gets at the very least recapped. Now, if it's been recapped in the past, I'll leave it as is. But if it's running on original caps, I'll definitely do a cap kit on it. And when it comes to flybacks, I will typically replace the fly on a G07 because I have watched them fail after doing cap kits on them. Sometimes I'll do it to a Sanyo 20 Easy as well because I've watched those fail. And K7000s I'll usually replace the flies on as well. But most other chassis, if it's still got the original flies and they're working just fine, I'll do the recap kit. I'll run it through a stress test where it runs, 72 hours, running straight the entire time. And then I'll turn it off and on a few times to make sure it can handle the stress. And if it passes that test, it's probably good to go. I'll take it out the door.
And what about the rest of the guys?
Most of ours have been worked on in some fashion, either because they failed or they were beginning to show their signs of age. I think only 2 of our games have not had any monitor work done on them, and that would be our Aliens cabinet and our Gate of Doom cabinet. Actually, no, our Robotron also, but it needs work. It needs to be recapped. It's getting very blurry. So everything else has had it. We did have, like Kay was saying, we had a G07 that replaced the caps on and blew up the flyback. Actually, twice. We had 2 G07s blow their flybacks. So definitely those needed to get replaced. It was Crystal Castles and Miss Pac-Man both blew out their flybacks. In the case of Crystal Castles, it was pretty catastrophic, and it took out part of the rest of the board too. So I don't feel bad about replacing a flyback. It's a part that wears out. Same with the capacitors. And there's not really any way around it. If you want to keep that monitor going, you're going to have to replace those parts if they're failing.
What about you, Jeremiah?
So if I even consider buying anything with the G07 or any monitor where all the parts are immediately replaceable, you've got a cap kit you can buy and a flyback you can buy, I'm going to do that stuff. Like I may turn it on before doing that. Half the time I'm just going to replace everything I can. And then with the G07, you get like the FR401 and other resistors that are known to immediately be bad. I see no use in giving that time to fail and destroy something else. So why not just immediately replace it?
Awesome. Well, I think that makes a great episode, right? So we're coming up on 2 hours. I think we talked about, everything we wanted to cover here. Is there anything, before we get to kind of, farewells or whatever, is there anything that any of the three you wanted to touch on this topic that we didn't hit on, right? Disdain for arcade one-ups, or, hey, I prefer this reproduction over that reproduction. What do anything you want to add? And yes, Chance, sorry, we only do this once a month, but hey, if you want, we can do it more frequently if there's a demand for it. Anything else you guys want to add to this topic?
Mike said something in the chat earlier that I wanted to touch on. Vector VGAs. He talked about putting one in a Tempest. I've had to do that as well because, color vector monitors are finite. There's only so many of them out there, and they're not in my warehouse. So I had a Tempest that straight up did not have a tube in it or a monitor or anything, any chassis, nothing, no frame, all completely gutted. And the only way that Tempest was ever going to live again was if I put a flat screen and a Vector VGA in it. And the result was okay. Like, you could tell it definitely didn't have a vector monitor in it, but there wasn't any video lag or anything like that. It was a perfectly playable game. You put it behind the smoked glass, and you can't even really I mean, you can tell if you know, but it doesn't have the jittering. You don't hear the sounds of the jittering, but it's a perfectly playable game. And I sold it to a customer who really enjoyed it. So it's the difference between having a working Tempest that someone has in their home that they can play and enjoy, or a broken Tempest that would still be sitting in my warehouse that no one could do anything with because I'll never find a monitor for it. So, sometimes you have to find a happy medium if you want to have a working game versus a project that'll just sit there until you're dead.
Liam or Jeremiah?
Vector VGAs have their place.
No.
I don't like it. I love the Tempest monitor. Sam can attest to this. I am weird enough that I will sit there in front of the monitor and just listen to it. Again, sound is very important to me, and I will listen to that vector chatter. And if I were to see a vector game, if I were to be put in front of a vector game and I didn't hear that sound, I would know. So, but they do have their place.
Program it into an FPGA and play that along with the sound.
I think it's a really cool piece of technology, and I'm glad that it exists for people to use. And I'm actually curious to see one in person to see what the result is like on a CRT hooked up to it. I think they're a little expensive though, almost as much as getting a vector.
It's like $575 for the Vector VGA, but especially if you were going to put one in a business to run 16.7. I would prefer the reliability of a flat screen and a Vector VGA than over a K6100, just because I don't want to go in there every 2 months and fix that thing.
Yeah, and Tempest and Space Tools in particular are found often without a 6100 in them because people scalp those 6100s to fix other more quote-unquote desirable vector games like Havoc and Quantum or Star Wars. Especially poor Space Tools get their monitors stolen a lot.
I am guilty of doing that.
All right, and I'm scrambling to try to get our outro thing working, and I think I might have found a loop around. I don't know if we want to go around the horn and tell everybody where they can find you if they want to hear more of your beautiful voice and your opinions on all things related to CoinOp.
All right, I'll go first. You can find me in the streets if you want to catch these hands. But other than that, you can find me on TikTok under the name Prime_Arcade. I do videos of all the repairs I do, pickups, deliveries, little slices
Jeremiah
of life,
Jackson,
things like that.
Oh, there we go.
Rude. But it's mostly I just do videos of my repairs, and they're not long form; they're very short form. So it's just kind of a summary of what I've done to a machine, but you can kind of see the internals of what I do and kind of get a feel for what it is I do to machines. And it also makes a great resource for me. So if I end up with a machine back, or if I have to do a repair on something I've worked on before, I can watch my previous videos and see what the hell I did to it the first time, because I don't remember.
And I am Liam from Retrobotics. You can find us there because I am only one half of that team. And hopefully we'll have some more content soon of some fashion. We just finished up Gauntlet, and there's a video out today. So if you're into just watching us talk about random games, come and take a look.
Jeremiah, do you want to... You started and then stopped. You're starting to look fuzzy, Jeremiah. Are we losing your signal?
Yeah, he just put a comment that says his internet's dying. So,
all right. Well, you can find Jeremiah. There he goes. You can find Jeremiah at CoinOp Corner on YouTube. Hopefully, he'll have something coming out soon. He's been teasing a bunch of stuff lately on his community tab. And Jeremiah is also Jeremiah Jackson on Clav if you want to go mess with him there. And of course, I'm Charlie from Overtime Arcade. If you're watching this right now, you're watching it on my channel. I do videos typically every Sunday afternoons, long form, sometimes an hour longer restoration project videos, and I throw some short ones in between. And I think I'm going to try to do this. I think I've got it figured out. It wouldn't let me upload a music file, but I think I've got this. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're listening to this later, the audio version, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's love and interaction in the live chat. And of course, all of our folks who donated via the super chat, Jerry and Stringer and Frog Puppet and Sean, I think. Thank you so much for all of that. And we've got Jeremiah here just in time to say goodbye. And I'm going to play his music, I think. Let me hit this button. No?
Do I need to do it live?
No.
It should be playing. It probably stripped the audio from it. I promise you I'm going to spend some time on this before the next episode. I'm going to do my monthly members-only live stream for Overtime Arcade sometime early next week, and I will practice with them and make sure that it's working. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the Coin Jam podcast. We'll see you next month.